Hello everyone, and welcome back to Through Africa, the program whereby we discuss Africa in details, its history, culture, agriculture, health, education, and a lot of other topics. Today we'll be discussing African literature and the upholders of culture. It is still me, your host, Mercy Bamibola. So when you think of literature, do you think about books? Do you think about the stories that they tell? Well, this might be the first thing that comes to your mind. But in actual fact, literature is wider than this. It is much more wider than we can even imagine. So what is the definition of literature? Literature refers generally to a collection of written works. It is also classified according to history, language, natural origin, and subject matter. Examples of literature classified according to language or nation include the French literature, the Arabic literature, Latin literature, and Japanese literature. Those separated based on their geographical regions include the Western literature, South Asian literature, and African literature, which is today our focus. The African literature focuses and consists of written and oral works. It could be in African languages and Afro-Asiatic languages. They also consist of works written by Africans in European languages. The Somali people have produced traditional written literature. Likewise, scholars of today's northern Nigeria created written literature in both the Hausa and Arabic language. Colonialism has had its own effect on the literature of many African countries. The modern African literatures were born from a system imposed by colonialism and the models drawn from Europe rather than the existing African traditions. This is why it is possible to read African works of literature originally written in English, French, and Portuguese languages. These languages being spoken and taught in various countries have spread due to a long history of European trade, exploration, and colonialism of the continent. The life of Chinua Achebe and his contributions to African literature. Popular African writers include Flora Nwakpa, Ama Ata Aido, Chinua Achebe, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Wole Soyinka, Den Okri, and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. It is impossible to talk about African literature without mentioning Chinua Achebe. His best-known books, No Longer at Ease and Things Fall Apart, had and still have a great impact on the world. His works generally focus on traditional African life in conflict with colonial rule and westernization. His novels focus on the traditions of the Igbo society and the effect of Christian influences and the clash of values during and after the colonial era. Born on November 16, 1930 in Ogidi, Nigeria, and died in 2013 in Boston, Massachusetts, Achebe was a Nigerian novelist whose writings examined the imposition of the Western culture on our African traditional system. Although he grew up in the Igbo society, he studied English language and literature at the University College, which is today known as the University of Ibadan. He went ahead to teach for a short time before joining the staff of the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation in Lagos, where he served as Director of External Broadcasting in 1961 to 1966. So his two books, Things Fall Apart and No Longer at Ease, is what we'll be considering now. Chinua Achebe went on to become a director of two Nigerian publishers, moved to the United States to become a teacher, and left Bard to join the faculty of Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. His first novel, Things Fall Apart, which was first published in 1958, focuses on the life of Okonkwo, the leader of the Igbo society. His journey after being exiled from the community for killing a clansman to his return. The title Things Fall Apart is coined from the line of a poem, The Second Coming by W.B. Yeats. Told through the lens of tradition and laid with Igbo proverbs, the novel examines the invasion of the white missionaries and the colonial government of the 1890s into the tribal Igbo society. In addition, Achebe incorporates the themes of masculinity and femininity, politics, and history into his oratory style. No Longer at Ease, published in 1960, tells the story of an Igbo man, Obi Okonkwo, who was charged with accepting bribe. This book proceeds Arrow of God and follows Things Fall Apart in what is popularly known as the African trilogy. The book tells the story of how Obi ended up in trial and his experience before moving to England. Obi, who was supposed to study law in England, switches his major from English and meets Clara Okeke, a student nurse whom he met at a dance. Clara would reveal that she was an outcast from her descendants, and Obi's parents would then oppose their marriage. Their engagement is broken, and Obi goes into a depression which leads him to take a bribe. The theme of corruption is examined in this novel. Obi, who was expected to return to help his people by representing them in the colonial legal system, finds himself in the crime he was supposed to fight. Chinua Achebe's works uphold the richness and the depth of the Igbo culture. The Arrow of God, the third book, which was published in 1964, tells the story of Ezeolu, the chief priest of several Igbo villages in colonial Nigeria, who confronts colonial powers and Christian missionaries in the 1920s. When Ezeolu is invited by the indigenous African Christian missionary to become a part of the colonial administration, he refuses the offer, refusing to be a white man's chief. This leads him into being thrown into prison. When he returns, he refuses to call the New Yam Feast to give thanks to Ulu, thereby breaking the trust of the people in him. The theme of the novel revolves around the struggle between community and change. The author clearly depicts the conflict between traditional values and religions in Nigeria and the effect of the foreign values introduced by the community by the Europeans rather to the community. He uses his narratives to highlight the richness and depth of the Igbo culture, a virtue that has been praised by many people around the world. He counters the Western stereotype of Africa being primitive by illustrating the complex social structures and practices of the Igbo community. Achebe was an upholder of culture, which will forever make him appreciated by the literary society and the world at large. With that, we have come to the end of today's program, and I hope that you learned something great from this. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next program. It is still me, your host, Mercy Bambola. Goodbye and stay safe.